Your brain doesn't want to change. But that's just like saying, um, the weather doesn't want to change. It's not a matter of it not wanting to do anything or wanting to do anything. It's not how I believe how it works. I believe that it's not going to change on its own. And in a way, in a strange way, I don't think it knows what is best for you. It doesn't have its own consciousness. It's not self-aware. It is just what it is, which is a miraculous thing in and of itself. I mean, just to be able to have thought is... The point I'm trying to make here is... it's going to be very difficult, and I'd like to say almost impossible. Now, not impossible. It's not like trying to fly. Or trying to become invisible. Okay? It's not impossible. Right? To teleport is impossible. To become invisible is impossible. I don't think that it will ever exist. Maybe teleportation, fine. I don't think we could ever become invisible. But what I'm trying to say is you take what is impossible, okay, and you realize that's not what you're going against. Although it may seem like that because it's extremely difficult, which makes it seem like it's almost impossible, which causes many people to quit, to give up, to say, I can't do it. I can't change my brain. I can't change the way I think. It doesn't feel natural. It's easier just to be, and therefore, that's the way it will be. And the hardest part to all this, as if that's not excruciating enough, you can get so far with, I'm improving the way I think my brain is changing, then in a way then I am changing of who I am, and blah, blah, blah. And then you end up reverting back to not where you want to be. And it's like, I can't do this. This is why it almost seems impossible. Because if you literally try to improve who you are with using your mind and therefore changing your brain, you're going to start to realize this is no joke. This is not just a game. This isn't just, I can do this. No, you have to have a lot of patience. You have to take your time. You have to pace yourself. You have to realize failure is inevitable, but also so is success. The problem is the success could be so minute, so minor, and seem so insignificant. In fact, that is so far from the truth, because if you stay with the course of things over years, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever, years of working with your thoughts, working with the contribution of how your mind is working, no doubt will you start to reap the rewards. And that is also one of the things that sucks about trying to improve. Because this isn't like trying to build muscle. I mean, in a way, I'd like to say it kind of is. Or it's kind of similar to trying to improve in a skill. Or try to improve in something you're so unfamiliar with. Like, go ahead and learn Russian if that's not something you're familiar with at all. It's kind of similar to these ways, but it's a million times harder. Because the things I just mentioned, you can and you will, no doubt, improve over time. And you may even see significant gains at first. Or maybe not. But nevertheless, you're working with your body chemistry, you're working with your brain structures, you're working with, in a very similar way, how you would work with your mind. But I'd like to say the only difference is the wiring of the mind, how that is set up. It's almost like cemented in place. The construct of your reality, of your thought. It's almost like, I can't explain it, but it's so tight. It's so compressed. It's like some form of cement. Or if you ever got glue, super glue stuck to your fingers, or it's hard to relate this because the point I'm trying to make, it almost seems like it's impossible. And anyone could relate to like a skill or working out or trying to lose weight. They could be in a very similar example. Or they're trying to overcome an addiction, or they're trying to, whatever it is. And it's like, it almost seems like impossible. So this is why I'm relating it. Because in real life, it's relatable. All I'm saying is, a lot of times things are just a little bit easier than changing the mind. That's all I'm trying to say. A lot of things are a lot easier than changing the mind. But nevertheless, there's things that can be equally challenging. It depends on the person and their situation, right? Depends on their ability of functioning and all that stuff. So I'm not trying to discount and say, well, nothing comes close. It really depends. But nevertheless, the mind, you have to understand, this is not something that can just change. So when you work on yourself, which I like to say, you work on your mind and you work on how you're thinking, yeah, it will take an extremely long time. But you could look at it like this too. How long have you lived? Have you ever stopped to say, well, what am I going to think like in 10 years? You probably have not done that, or I don't think a lot of people do that. They don't say to themselves, well, how am I going to think in 10 years from now? The way I'm going to think, how is that going to be? And it almost stops you from your own current reality and be like, what, does it matter? I'm going to be different. Hopefully I'll be a better person. And you start to rationalize it all, reason with it, and therefore, it's not really that big of a deal. But I say this because 10 years ago, if you're a child, it's hard to really relate, because what if you're only 7? Or what if you're 10 or 15 years old? If you're 15 years old, that would mean, well, at 5 years old, you could have asked yourself, how am I going to think? What type of way is my mind going to think in 10 years? And that is something a 5-year-old probably, it would be like talking to I don't know, something that can't really understand or comprehend. I'm not saying it can't be helpful, but it's kind of like that's. I say this because you have to be at a point in life, I believe, and it's not 100%, but I believe for the most part you should be at a point in life where you realize I can think where my mind will be in 10 years, and it's a very strange thought. But I mention this because 10 years from now, no doubt you'll be a different person. But this is the thing that happens. People stay the same. The only reason people stay the same is because they never worked on the way they think. Now, we could say people change for the worse. We could say people change for the better. But where is that coming from? And we could also say people don't change. And the ones that don't change, I'm not saying the people that change for good or bad is any different, because for all we know, people change because they're trying to be, a more important person somehow. And when I say more important, they try to make themselves seem more valuable. So they become more popular. They become more of this and more of that. And they keep adding to they want their looks to be a certain way. And they want their lifestyle to be a certain way. And they want all this to be a certain way. Maybe they want to have a certain status or, a certain amount of income or, whatever it is. And I'm not saying any of that is bad, but when that's coming from an unhealthy place, and we can say, well, in 10 years, what if you had all this stuff? What would it matter if you're compensating? I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm not going to say that's bad anyway. But it's like, that's not the type of change I'm talking about. The type of change I'm talking about is just simply how you think. And simply how you think isn't something that could really change. So in essence, we could look at how someone is 10 years from now, say, wow, they changed a lot. Let's say for the good. All this is good for them. Look at their life. Or even if we're saying, oh, it's pretty good. Doesn't have to be great. But nevertheless, we don't know how they think. Do they even know how they're thinking? Do they think that their mind really has changed much? Or is what they just have done changed? And I'm not saying that's even that bad. I'm just saying, if you want to be really happy, that's not really a reflection of happiness. Because I could go ahead and, study hard and work hard and make a lot of money and blah, 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 and work out and, maybe learn a lot and all this stuff. And I'm not saying any of that is bad. I don't want to give the wrong impression. I'm just saying that's not going to yield what is truly peacefulness and truly self-love. I might like all this, the reality I've created because of the work I put into it, but it's not the same thing as the reality you've created from the work you put in with your mind. In a way, two separate realities. But the point I'm trying to make here is, this is very difficult, almost impossible, but it's achievable. It just has to be realized as the truth, because it's going to take years for you to start to see a significant difference. That's the problem. It takes years. But here's the best part about it. When you start to improve, even if it was a short term, maybe 6 months, maybe 9 months, maybe a year. It doesn't have to be 5 years. But what I'm trying to say is, even if you start to realize you're improving, that's good and all, and that's nice, but you have to realize that you're not done. You're not even close. Because this is for the rest of your life. Then you start to realize, holy shit. What? I gotta think a certain way and have my mind work a certain way for the rest of my life? Yes. Now that is called truly changing. But this is the best part to it. If that doesn't sound like something that you want, you only are who you are based off how you do things and based off how you think. When you become that way is, in a way, we could say that in a way that's who you are, and that's going to stay that way. And the only way that changes if we change how we do any of that. And there has to be a consistency with that. And then when you, I'd like to say when you evolve, you mold. You mold into a new way, and that's the way you are now. And that way of which you become, you'll want to maintain it. Because it's not the short term. It's not just a gain. It's not just something you're trying to get. You're not trying to... You're trying to realize you're tired of being who you are now. And being who you are now is a product of how you've always thought, and therefore a product of how you've always, or what you have experienced in life. Right? We change our current experience to think a certain way, to be a certain way, to work a certain way. Then moving forwards, that will change, even to the slightest degree, but over time, it becomes more significant. And then you mold. So you become more comfortable with being uncomfortable. Meaning, it's not really uncomfortable anymore. Or it's really not that hard. Or I enjoy it. Or we can say we fall in love with improving how we're thinking. Imagine falling in love with self-improvement. Imagine falling in love with that. It sounds far-fetched. Like, how's that possible? I'd like to say the only reason anyone really falls in love with anything, and I'm not going to compare this to falling in love with like another human or something, but with anything, and it could be comparable, but what I'm trying to say is you get really good. You get so good, it becomes something that you love to now think a certain way, to be a certain way, to do a certain way. You become like a professional. You start to advance to such levels. You become like whatever, a master or whatever it is. You get to such a level and you start to realize, I really enjoy this. And it's still a journey. And maybe I'm still not where I want to be. Or maybe I am, but I want to continue. And in a way, which is the most ironic thing, maybe it's that you don't want to continue. Now hear me out here. Maybe it's that you've constructed your brain to be a certain way, and now that's the way you are. And in a way, that becomes your comfort level. And in a way, because that's your comfort level, even in an improved way, that can stay that way. So you can at any point stop working on yourself. But what I'm trying to say is, just like anyone's comfort level, where you are now with who you are, okay? And I'm not saying that's comfortable. Some people could say, no, it's chaotic. I hate where I'm at with who I am. But I'm saying it's comfortable because you haven't changed it. Because it's very difficult. So in a way we could say, well, it's comfortable only because it's difficult to change. I don't like it. And that in a way is very similar to being comfortable with being improved. Because your brain gets used to a certain way of doing things, a certain way of being. The working of it is working a certain fluidity to it. There's a flow to it, and all of a sudden, you can start to realize it's not a matter of what I like, and it's not even a matter of what's comfortable. Those are byproducts of just how my brain is operating. I'm always going to be the outcome of that. How I think is going to always be an outcome. How I am is going to be, it's an outcome of how the brain is working, right? So, no matter how you look at any of this, you could say, well, I'm always going to have the brain be operating at a certain level throughout my whole life. Okay. Well, imagine if you got through what was extremely difficult, complicated, and excruciating, and you got through that. Life is going to be a hell of a lot easier. I'm not going to say you're going to be like, oh, I'm good where I'm at. I'm going to stop self-working on my own mind and my own brain and all that. No, I think eventually you start to fall in love. You start to become very comfortable with this level of improvement. And it's still difficult. It's still challenging. But you get through what the most difficult part was. But that takes years. And you have to be willing to say, I'm going to start. I'm going to try. That right there is good. It's not good enough, but it's good. Because you're at least going against, right there, when you say, I'm going to try, and you say you do try, and then the next day or next week you find that you've stopped. Well, I wonder why it was hard. So do it again. Maybe you go a little bit longer. And then maybe there's failure. And then you do it again. And you repeat this process. And over time, you'll start to realize, damn, it's getting easier with what's extremely difficult. And that's your process. That's how you live it now. And then you start to realize 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, whatever the case, I could do more. Maybe there's still failure. But look where you're at now. And that's the whole point.